The quest to join the League of Nations. The first 2 shakings. The Hopi are told in their prophecies that there would come a time after great struggle when people would build a great house for all nations of this world. They heard that President Wilson was building a great house on the west coast of this land. They were told that this house would make it possible for all races to join together and work to improve the League of Nations. The Hopi knew that if all races representing all people of the earth were not represented in this house, there could be no peace, and instead, the hard times they were already experiencing would just get worse. The story of Woodrow Wilson's League of Nations spread throughout the Indian nations. The Hopi elders felt that this very well could be an opportunity to get their message out to the world. The Hopi met with the other Indian nations in Arizona, and they gathered in a great council, the like of which has not been seen in the West since the ghost dance was first held in Nevada by the first prophet, Wavoka. If the Hopi were not heard and all the races of the earth were not represented equally, the Hopi knew that nothing could prevent the first shaking. The Hopi interpreted this shaking to be World War I. The second shaking was to be preceded by the sun rising in the west instead of the east. Hopi elders interpreted this to be Japan, the land of the rising sun, as we entered World War II. People gathered from several Indian nations and elected the Hopi to lead a group of elders to Washington, D.C., and send word to President Wilson that they wanted an opportunity to speak at his League of Nations in San Francisco. They wished to be represented and to tell the nations of the world of the prophecies they had been given. For all the signs indicated that the shaking of the earth and the end-time prophecies were very near. The United States blocked the attempts of the Hopi and other nations to be heard as sovereign nations, and they were sent away. So, in other words, the United States censored the Hopi and other Indian nations, I would say indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. The American government felt at that time that it could not afford to allow the Indian nations to be represented to the other nations of the world. Although the Indian nations were referred to in all treaties that they signed with the United States government as being, I'm air quoting, sovereign people and sovereign nations unto themselves, the American government feared then, as it does now, that to allow the native people to be considered a sovereign nation would open the government to suits regarding the violation of treaty terms and illegal land acquisitions and programs of genocide against the Indian nations. When the Hopi's request was refused, the elders went home, knowing that Woodrow Wilson's plan for a League of Nations would fail. Fail for all the people of this land and would not be truly represented. If the Hopi were not heard and all races of the earth were not represented equally, the Hopi knew that nothing could prevent the first shaking. The Hopi interpreted this shaking to be World War I. There would be those who would survive this shaking, as it subsided, humankind would again be given the opportunity to come together in harmony and completion. So many chances, huh? If this was not accomplished, then there would be a second shaking as the eagle grabbed the earth, this time with both talons. This second shaking was to be preceded by the sun rising in the west instead of the east. And the Hopi elders interpreted this to be Japan, the land of the rising sun, as we entered World War II. The Hopi were also told that they would see the sign of life, the four-direction sign, reversed. This they saw as the swastika of the Third Reich. This was seen over 10,000 years ago by the elders that during this second terrible shaking, bugs would appear in the sky, and they would begin to pour forth the gourds of hot ashes that would burn the earth itself and render it lifeless. As the gourds fell upon the earth, the people would burn as the prairie grasses burn. Whole tribes of people would be destroyed. The gourds of ashes were first let loose upon the earth with the dropping of the atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, bringing a quick ending to World War II and ushering in the arms race. Fear quickly spread throughout the world's indigenous people as they watched the war nations of the world play games of nuclear domination. Gourds of ashes may not have been atomic bombs, but rather the chemtrails that we now accept as commonplace and create all manner of spider webs in our skies. I have to interject. I'm in Southern California, and the last 2 days, it's March 23rd and 24th, I've seen chemtrails in the sky. And the sky's all beautiful and clear because we've just been blessed with rain. You know, that crispy rain smell. And to look up and see the chemtrails, it's just, you can't not see it if you have eyes to see. The Hopi were given yet another symbol to assist them in recognizing the coming of the final days. This symbol was the five-pointed star, which represented man being placed within the great circle. The circle always represented the Creator. This symbol of the five-pointed star within the great circle of Creator would represent that those who ruled this land at that time would put themselves above Creator. This is the symbol of the U.S. Air Force and is seen on military vehicles today. It is yet another sign that we are in the dream of insanity, where humankind has forgotten to think with their hearts and thinks only with their minds. This creates Kiansokwatsi, the world out of balance. Oh.